Welcome to Nathenstein. Don't forget to subscribe for more horror stories. Like and share. It started, as most horrors do, with a simple night's rest. But for Eleanor, this night would be different. Every night for the past few weeks, she'd been having the same dream. It was a disturbing, yet strangely captivating dream. One that felt so real, so vivid, that it lingered long after she woke. Little did she know, this dream would eventually tear apart her very perception of reality. Eleanor was a woman of routine. Her days spent in the humdrum of her mundane office job, working as an editor at a small publishing house. Her nights, though, had been increasingly restless. At first, it seemed like a blessing. Her dreams were rich and full of detail, the kind of dreams that felt like a story unfolding in her mind. But that illusion shattered on the night it all changed. The dream began the same way it always did. Eleanor stood at the edge of a dark, foggy forest. The trees twisted unnaturally, their branches stretching like fingers reaching out to her. The air was thick with an unsettling quiet, broken only by the occasional rustling sound from deep within the woods. It was always this eerie stillness that struck her first. Her heart would start pounding, but she couldn't seem to move, couldn't run, couldn't escape. Then she'd hear it, a soft whisper, like a breeze through the trees. "Come to me." Eleanor's breath would catch in her throat, her instinct screaming at her to turn around and flee. But every time, she found herself walking deeper into the forest, compelled by something she couldn't explain. The trees seemed to bend towards her, as if they were alive, watching, waiting. After walking for what felt like hours, she would arrive at an old, decaying house. It was a house that had never been there before, a house she had never seen in real life. But yet somehow, it felt familiar. The windows were dark, the wooden planks rotting, and a thick layer of dust covered everything. There was a palpable sense of dread that clung to the place, like it had been abandoned long ago. Every time, Eleanor would step inside, and it would be the same. The door creaked loudly as it opened, and she would be greeted by the oppressive silence. The walls of the house seemed to whisper her name, beckoning her further in, and then she would see him. A man stood in the hallway, shrouded in shadows. His face was never clear, always obscured by a veil of darkness, but his presence was suffocating. He never moved, never spoke, but she could feel his gaze on her, penetrating her very soul. Eleanor could feel the icy chill that radiated from his figure, and she would try to scream, but no sound came out. Her limbs would freeze, paralyzed by fear, and the dream would always end before she could learn anything more about him. It was a cycle night after night, the same dream, the same house, the same man. But soon, things began to change. The dreams began to shift. Subtle at first, small details out of place that didn't seem right. In one dream, she noticed a faint smell of sulfur, and in another, the creaking of the floorboards seemed too loud. Then came the night it all crossed the line. Eleanor woke with a start, her heart hammering in her chest. The room was dark, and she was drenched in sweat. The air felt thick, almost suffocating. She glanced at her clock, 3:14 a.m. She tried to shake off the remnants of the dream, but something was wrong. The feeling lingered in her chest like a weight, and her mind raced to process the strange feeling. She felt ... watched. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled. Eleanor slowly turned her head toward the window. The moonlight filtered through the blinds, casting long, twisted shadows on the floor. For a brief moment, she thought she saw something move, a figure shrouded in the same dark shadow from her dream. Her heart skipped a beat. She blinked, and it was gone. Shaking her head, she tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, but the sensation of being watched wouldn't go away. The next day at work, Eleanor tried to push the unease aside. She told herself that it was just a dream, but something inside her told her otherwise. Something about that shadow, about the way it had seemed almost real, gnawed at her mind. She began to feel paranoid, as though the world around her wasn't quite what it seemed. That evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, the phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello," Eleanor answered, her voice tinged with curiosity. A deep, raspy voice came through the line, sending a shiver down her spine. "You don't remember me, do you?" The voice was familiar, but she couldn't place it. It was a voice she had heard in her dreams, echoing in the darkness. Her heart raced. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "You're dreaming of me, Eleanor." The voice continued, each word sending chills down her spine. "I've been waiting for you." Eleanor's blood ran cold as realization dawned on her. The man in her dreams, he was real, or at least something about him was real. Her mind reeled with the impossibility of it. She didn't even remember hanging up the phone. That night, she was reluctant to sleep, but exhaustion overcame her, and she slipped into unconsciousness. The dream came, as expected, but it was different. This time, she was already inside the house. She stood in the hallway, her breath shallow, every instinct screaming for her to run. The shadows seemed to grow darker, more alive, and then, as always, he appeared. But this time, he spoke. "I've been waiting for you, Eleanor," the man whispered, his voice like a soft caress. "You've crossed the line. Your dreams are mine now." Eleanor tried to scream, but her voice caught in her throat. She could feel the air grow colder around her, and her vision blurred. The walls of the house began to twist and contort, and Eleanor felt herself falling, spiraling into darkness. Suddenly, the house was no longer a house, it was her apartment. Her heart hammered in her chest as she realized that she was no longer dreaming. She was awake, but everything around her had changed. The room was darker than it should have been. The air was thick with an oppressive energy. She could hear something breathing right behind her. Spinning around, Eleanor froze. There, standing in the doorway of her apartment, was the man. His face was clearer now, gaunt, twisted, with eyes that burned with an unnatural light. His grin stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged, yellow teeth. "You've read into my reality, Eleanor," he whispered, his voice like a death rattle. "And now you belong to me." Eleanor tried to run, but her body wouldn't move. She was frozen in place, her body betraying her as he approached, his every step sending a wave of dread through her. "You can't escape now," the man said, his grin widening. "Your dreams and reality have merged. There is no waking from this." And as he reached for her, Eleanor knew this wasn't just a nightmare. This was the end. Her dreams had become her reality, and there was no escape from the terror that awaited her. The Dream Eater. It started on a quiet Tuesday evening, as all horrors often do. Charlotte had never been the type to have nightmares. Sure, she'd had the occasional unsettling dream, but nothing that lingered when she woke. Until that fateful night. That night, she went to bed as usual, exhausted from the day's stress. But when she closed her eyes, she found herself on an unfamiliar street, bathed in an unnatural, dull light. It felt cold, almost as though the air itself was dead, void of life. The streets were empty save for the distant sound of something shuffling. Charlotte stood frozen, the air pressing in on her as a thick fog rolled in. She tried to move, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. It was as if her body was tied to the ground. She could hear faint whispers, now voices carried by the wind that made her skin crawl. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the fog. It was tall, unnaturally tall, with long, slender limbs that creaked as it moved. Its face was obscured by darkness, but its eyes, Charlotte would never forget those eyes. They glowed a sickly yellow and locked onto her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. The figure's lips parted, revealing rows of jagged teeth, but no sound escaped. Instead, the whispers intensified, swirling around Charlotte, growing louder and more deafening until they felt like they were inside her head. She couldn't escape them, couldn't focus. The figure took another step toward her, and then, just as it was about to reach her, Charlotte woke up with a start. The room was silent, normal. Her heart raced in her chest, her mind spinning. It was just a dream, she told herself. It had to be, but the eddies lingered, gnawing at her, as though the dream hadn't ended. She tried to shake it off and went about her day, but the shadows followed her. The whispers haunted her thoughts, and no matter how many times she tried to focus, that thing in the fog was always there waiting. As the days passed, the dreams continued, but each night they grew worse. The figure got closer, its eyes burning with hunger. Its whispers became clearer, now words that Charlotte could understand. "You belong to me now." Charlotte grew more and more restless. Her sleep was plagued by the figure, and every time she woke, it felt like the dream was still creeping into her reality. The shadows in her room grew darker, more solid, like the very walls were alive, watching her. The whispers didn't fade when she opened her eyes. They followed her, even in the daylight, soft and sinister, like a constant hum in the back of her mind. One night, the figure didn't just stay in her dreams. Charlotte woke up to find herself still in that eerie, fog-covered street. The fog swallowed everything, the sounds, the smells, everything but the figure. And this time, it spoke directly to her. "It's too late for you." She tried to run, but her feet were glued to the ground. Just like before, the figure loomed closer, its hollow eyes burning into her soul. "You've been marked," it whispered. "Your dreams are mine. I feed on them." Suddenly, Charlotte's body moved without her will. Her limbs jerking like a marionette's strings were being pulled. She screamed, but no sound came out. The figure's skeletal hands reached out, and as they touched her, Charlotte's consciousness fractured. Her body trembled, her skin burning as though something was trying to claw its way out from within her. She felt the sharp sting of something digging into her mind, her thoughts being ripped apart. It felt as though the figure was consuming her very essence. Piece by piece, the figure's grin widened, a hollow abyss that threatened to swallow her whole. Just as she thought she would lose herself, the world around her shattered like glass. She woke up in her bed again, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. But it wasn't over. The whispers were there, still in her ears, still inside her head. The figure's eyes burned behind her eyelids. The days became a blur. Charlotte lost track of time as the dreams and whispers tore at her sanity. She stopped sleeping, afraid that if she closed her eyes, she would be consumed. But even in the daylight, she saw glimpses of the figure in the corner of her vision, its yellow eyes watching her every move. Then one night, she didn't wake up. Her body was found the next morning, lying on the floor of her apartment. Her eyes were wide open, empty, devoid of life. Her mouth was frozen in a scream, though no sound had escaped. It was as if her very soul had been sucked out of her, torn apart by the entity that had haunted her dreams. No one knew what happened to Charlotte, but the whispers, the figure, and the shadowed streets. Those who lived in the apartment complex could hear them sometimes, late at night, drifting through the walls. And to this day, the whispers still haunt the halls, waiting for the next victim to fall into the dream that reads into reality. The Dreamkeeper. When Lucas first moved into the old house on the outskirts of town, he didn't think much of the strange history surrounding it. The house had been empty for years, its walls weathered, and its garden overgrown. But Lucas was in need of a fresh start. His previous life had been filled with too much pain, and this new home was supposed to be his escape. He wanted nothing more than to find peace, sleep, eat, work, and start over. But the house had other plans. The first night in the house, Lucas slept soundly, the exhaustion of the move overcoming him. But the dreams began that very night. It wasn't long before they became more vivid, more unsettling. In his dream, Lucas was standing in a large, dimly lit room. The air was thick with dust, and the floor was covered with worn, faded rugs. The room was eerily silent. It felt ancient, as though it had been untouched by time. There was a mirror at the far end of the room, large and ornate, its surface covered in grime. As Lucas stared at his reflection, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The figure in the mirror was not him, it was a twisted version of himself. His reflection grinned back at him, the smile stretching far too wide, too unnatural. "Who are you?" Lucas whispered, his voice trembling. The reflection didn't answer. Instead, it slowly reached out of the mirror, its fingers long and thin, like claws, scratching against the glass. The sound was horrifying, grating on his ears. Lucas tried to step back, but his feet were rooted to the floor. His body refused to move, as if the room itself was holding him in place. Suddenly, the reflection's eyes flickered with a wicked glow, and a voice echoed through his mind. "You will never leave. You will stay with me forever." Lucas jolted awake, sweat pouring down his face, his heart hammering in his chest. The dream had been so real, so vivid. He wiped his forehead and tried to shake off the remnants of the nightmare. It was just a dream, he told himself. But that night, the dream came again. And the night after that, and the night after that. Every time he slept, the same dream repeated itself with terrifying precision. The room, the mirror, the reflection never changed. The figure in the mirror grew more grotesque with each passing night. Its grin more malevolent, its eyes more predatory. It would always reach out toward him, always whisper the same words, "You belong to me." Lucas tried everything to stop the dreams. He stayed up late reading. He drank warm milk. He even tried sleeping with the lights on. But nothing worked. The dreams found their way into his mind no matter how hard he tried to block them out. It wasn't long before the nightmares began to leak into his waking life. He would walk past mirrors in his house and catch glimpses of something strange in the reflection, his own face. But it wasn't quite him. The smile would be too wide, the eyes too dark, and sometimes, just as he looked away, he could hear a whispering voice in the distance. "Come back, Lucas." By the fifth night, Lucas couldn't take it anymore. He was exhausted, physically and mentally. The lack of sleep was wearing him down, and the feeling of being trapped in this endless nightmare was driving him mad. Desperate, he researched the house's history. That's when he found the old newspaper article, the one that had been hidden beneath the layers of dust in the attic. The article told the story of a man named Robert Drayton, a previous tenant of the house, who had mysteriously disappeared decades ago. According to the article, Robert had been a brilliant but reclusive man, obsessed with dreams and the subconscious mind. He had devoted his life to studying lucid dreaming, and had even built a machine designed to help people control their dreams. But one night Robert had vanished, leaving nothing behind but his journals, which detailed a terrifying discovery: the ability to make dreams become real. Lucas's heart sank as he read the last part of the article. Robert's final entry in his journal claimed that he had unlocked a way to pull his dreams into the real world, to *live* them. But it came at terrible cost. The dreams no longer obeyed his will. They became twisted, malevolent, and began feeding on his very soul. Lucas slammed the article down in horror. He knew exactly what had happened. The dream he had been experiencing, whatever it was, had been created by Robert Drayton, and now it had latched onto him. It was using his mind as a vessel, drawing him deeper into its web. That night, Lucas decided to confront the dream. He had to end it, or it would consume him. He went to bed with one goal in mind: to face whatever was waiting for him in that cursed room. When he fell asleep, he found himself once again standing in that familiar, cold room. The air felt heavier this time, the silence even more oppressive. The mirror at the far end was clearer than before, and he could see the reflection waiting for him. The twisted figure stood there, its grin stretching even further, its eyes glowing with malice. But this time, Lucas wasn't afraid. He was angry. He stepped toward the mirror, his voice steady. "You don't control me anymore," he said, his words ringing out in the quiet room. The figure's smile faltered, and for the first time, it seemed confused. It took a step back, its hands shaking. "You can't escape," it hissed, its voice now desperate. "I'm not running," Lucas replied, his voice stronger. "I'm waking up." With all the strength he could muster, he reached out and touched the mirror. As soon as his fingers made contact, the room trembled, and the reflection screamed an inhuman, blood-curdling sound. The mirror cracked, its surface splintering like glass, and the figure in the reflection began to twist and writhe, dissolving into the cracks. The scream continued, growing louder, more desperate, until it was deafening. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the sound stopped. The mirror shattered completely, and the room fell silent. Lucas woke up in his bed, gasping for air. The sunlight streamed through the window, and for the first time in weeks, he felt at peace. The oppressive weight of the dreams had lifted. He had done it. The nightmare was over. But as he sat up in bed, he glanced toward the mirror on his dresser. His reflection was staring back at him. Its grin too wide, its eyes too dark, and in the silence of his room, he heard it, the whisper, soft and mocking, in the corner of his mind. "You'll never escape, Lucas.